What do you? I mean, have any contact with Artie at all? I ask everyone who joins me here.
Sure. Yeah. I talked to Artie.
How is he?
He's hanging in there.
And sure enough, like a half hour later, Ronnie showed up with Howard and Beth and Joe, the other security guy. And Joe said something to Artie, and Artie just sat there and was like sedate. He was like, fine. Like, I don't know what Joe said to him, but Joe was able to calm him down within seconds.
I guess at some point they go, hey, we like Artie's the best for this job, so let's hire him, which is fine. I mean, he was great for the job. I mean, I wasn't jealous or anything like when he got the job. Like, okay, that's fine. I was still going on the show all the time, so it didn't really make a difference.
What was the thought process going through your mind at this point of shooting in the studio? And how did you?
I thought, there's the King's Throne. I told my buddy, I was like, dude, we should record this. Like, we're in Howard's studio.
Early 2000s, you start calling in from Las Vegas, and then it turns into, I've got an idea every day. Tell me a little bit about just the beginnings of Shuli. You were a comedian, you're working out in Las Vegas, and you're thinking, I want to be part of this show. How do I do it?
Yeah, I mean, I had lived in L.A. for 10 years. That's where I discovered Howard in the early 90s when he came on in L.A. And then by the time I got to Vegas, I mean, I had listened to so much of the show. I recorded best ofs on cassettes. Whenever I would go on drives with my family, I'd force them to listen to it. So I was a huge, huge fan. And, as far as calling in, like, as dumb as it sounds and as wild as it sounds, it was literally like a movie, like it was scripted. Like, I had this idea because he announces one night, I'm coming to Vegas to do a set of shows from the Hard Rock, and we're gonna make bets at the blackjack table. And I'm like, shit, I'm gonna call in. I had heard this like stock joke I worked in this liquor souvenir store in downtown Vegas, like right by where the county jail is and where all the pawn shops are and the Fremont Street Experience. So I used to meet a lot of interesting people. And this one guy told me this stock joke that I just thought was so funny. It's a street joke. So I said, you know what? I'm going to call in. I'm going to proposition how I'm going to say, I'm going to tell you this joke. And if you laugh, I want to make a bet with you guys at the table. And I pick up the phone. I dial the 800 number and sure enough, picks up. First time, Benji screening the calls. And he's like, what do you want to talk to Howard about? And I tell him, and he puts me on hold. And 2 minutes later, I'm on the air with Howard doing the joke. He laughed. And next thing you know, he's like, hold on for Gary. And from 10, 11 years of listening, my first call, I got booked to make a bet with them at the blackjack table.
Remember that? Yeah. It was Scott Einzinger basically put you guys together, right? That's how you got it was at E, right?
Yeah, Scott and I started working together in August 1994.
I think it was July.
So I came on first week in August, so you were there 2 weeks before me.
Yeah.
But yeah, it goes back. So do the math. What is that, 27 years ago? Jeez.
Yeah.
Oh, my God.
It was, a small crew. It was, about 4 or 5 techs and 2 or 3 producers, Ganji included.
Yeah, it was me, Ganji, Radzinski, and Einziger. Pretty much, that was it.
So Scott, you directed the first E show that...
No, what had happened was I did camera work for the first maybe 2 months, and our director got sick. No, actually, our director wanted to leave and go back to L.A. He told another guy to do it, who was our engineer. He started doing it, wasn't very good. He got sick. They said, well, Scott, why don't you do it? So I did a great job. And then when he came back, they said, we want Scott to keep doing it.
Was it a great job, Doug? Did you feel that way that he was, or did he just tell, or he was just very good at telling people that he was doing a great job?
No, Scott is a very good director that I'm glad he acknowledged it, because he's really good. And I've seen a lot of directors work with a lot of directors, and he's right up there with the best of them. He really is. To work that spontaneously and put out a quality product when you go into post-production and have minimal edits and fixes to the line cut, besides like sprucing it up with graphics and B-roll. Scott was really good, really good. Yeah. In fact, the first director was a real big wig director, and he didn't get it. That's part of the reason. I don't know if he left or just wasn't feeling it, or if LA was an excuse, but he just didn't get it. He was producing line cuts that were pretty bad. And he's directing a major syndicated show right now. He's still in the business, but he just didn't get that spontaneous.
I think it was more he didn't jive with Howard, though the two of them didn't see eye to eye.
Do you know what June 6, 2003 is? Does that date ring a bell for you?
I was not on the grassy knoll, if that's what you're asking. Well, what is that?
Your first day sitting in on the show, according to marksfriggin.com. And I'm curious about just sitting in on the show. So you're a caller. You're starting to make your way through, but now you're asked to sit in. What is that day like when they call? Just give me a little bit about that. I'm sure it's Gary, but tell me who calls. Where are you, and like what's that feeling like when they're like, dude, you're gonna be not just calling in, not just being in for the news. You're on. I mean, you started the day that morning on the show, according to Mark Friggin, and I sort of remember it.
Yeah, it was wild, man. It was, to think that they would even give me this opportunity, just shows how poor the booking was back then, really, is what it shows. There's no reason I wasn't ready. I didn't know shit about radio. I wasn't really funny then. You know what I mean? Like, I was so new to everything. But again, here's the thing, right? Like, I was calling in with material. I was calling in with games, with questions on my own. Nobody asked me to do it. There was no payment for it. I used to have comics in Vegas that would be like, what the fuck are you doing? You're staying up till 6 a.m, calling some fucking show. The guy doesn't pay you. And I'm just like, how do you not get this? To me, it was a no-brainer. I'm like, because Stuttering John would sit here and go, oh, he loves your calls. Or Benji would say, oh, he really likes your stuff. That's all I need to hear. That's it. I'm doing, that's my job now. And that's literally how I treated it. So when they brought me in, I mean, I'm almost positive, because I don't remember a lot about it. I'm almost positive it was terrible. I remember I sat in for the news once at K-Rock, and Gary, to my face after the segment, I go, I'm just sitting there in my head going, I wonder how that went. And he goes, no, you did a great job. He goes, why don't you go hang out in the Yucko the Clown room, which was his way of saying the bomb room. And I'm like, I remember at one point Howard saying, and I don't know if it was this appearance, but I remember at one point saying, I like when you call in because I can hang up on you. He's like, can you go call in from the green room? So I probably was just shot out of a cannon, blah, 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 all over the place. I know it didn't go well.
So just give me that day when you get the call that Howard 101 is going to be happening. I guess Tim Sabian's probably the guy that you knew. Tell me how this all came about, that you start working on a Howard channel, and what it meant when you heard that this was happening to you.
Well, in actuality, I'd gotten fired in March of 2004 for having the second largest fine. In fact, the big Nipplegate Janet Jackson thing that was started by Fred Upton, the congressman from Michigan, and then subsequently became a big witch hunt into, a television nipple issue ended up being, two of the Howard and I were the two largest casualties. Howard had 31 CBS backed affiliates. Says it didn't really matter to him. I didn't. I got fired in March of 2004, and I didn't have anything to do. Well, immediately I started talking to Jeremy Coleman from Sirius, and of course Sirius and XM were two different entities back then. And so I started talking to Jeremy Coleman, and I was slated. And I don't know that if Howard knows this or not. I'm sure he does. But I was talking to Jeremy Coleman and Jay Clark, and Jay Clark was the president of programming at the time. And they initially were going to make me. I was going to come in and be the morning guy on Sirius. The job that Howard had. And at that point, things started happening, and it got to be like July, August of 2004. And I think at that point, Howard kind of became a little bit available, or Ross Sapin started talking to somebody on Howard's behalf. And all of a sudden, they stopped talking to me altogether. I almost had my deal done in like July of 2004, and I was going to start in the fall. And all of a sudden, Walter Sabo and Jay Clark and all these guys that I'm talking to get this deal done on Sirius stop. And they're like, I remember in October of 2004, I got a call from Walter Sabo, and he's like, Bubba, there's been a change in the wind here, and we aren't interested in you being the morning guy anymore. And I'm like, well, what do you mean? And then all of a sudden they announced that they just cut a deal with Howard. So at that point, they tell me, well, we're still kind of interested in you, but it would probably only be with Howard's blessing. And, you know, at this point, Howard and I were arch nemesis. Like I'd been syndicated in Hartford, and I talked all this shit about Howard, and, you know, Howard's a pussy, and Howard's not a real man, and I'm a real man. I fucking can drive a truck, and I can run a bulldozer, and I'll kick your ass. Just the standard, you know, radio shit. And, you know, fuck you, Howard. I'm going to write some parody songs about how stupid you are, and, you know, all this kind of, how you look like Big Bird and all this bullshit. And did the same shit that Howard, you know, did, like with John DeBella and all, you know, the standard radio stuff. And at that point, then Brent Hatley, my producer, called up Don Buchwald and said, you know, can we put our name in the hat or something? And in Thanksgiving of that year, Howard summons us to come up to New York. And so Brent Hatley and I flew to New York. It was a week before Thanksgiving.
So fortunately for me in the organization, I worked hand in hand with Bubba on this deal. So you can go back to 2004. It was the Tuesday before Thanksgiving, and I'm talking with Bubba, and he's like, hey, why don't you give Gary dell'abate a call and see, like, with this Sirius channel, if we can get the afternoon slot. I was like, you know, I love Gary, but I'm calling Don's office. I'm calling Don Buchwald's office. So I called Don Buchwald's office, and I expected to leave a message with his assistant. His assistant puts me through to his cell phone, like live. So Don gets on the phone with me and says, hey, you and Bubba be in my office. This is on Tuesday at noon. I'm like, we'll be there. So we're there Tuesday at noon, and we bring all these materials to give Don for him to review. And we want to be on the channel. And Don sits us down on a couch in his office, and he says, we have a list of people that we want to work with, and there's one show on that list, and you're that show. And we know all this stuff. We've already looked to it, because of course they had. Of course they'd done their research and looked around. So he says, come back at 4. Howard will be here. So Howard and Bubba sat down at 4 o'clock. They let all of bygones be bygones. But like I said, it was childish name calling. It wasn't anything really serious. So they worked that all out, and that was at the end of 04.
What was it like the first time you got called in there? I don't feel like you get real worked up, or for what I can tell, but it had to be kind of cool. How did that happen? Does Gary call you? Just give me that first trip into the Howard Stern show, because that does, when a stand-up comedian walks in there, they can walk out and then start selling out shows for 6 months, a year, 5 years.
It was unbelievable. I remember it was July 18, 2001. Oh. I still remember that date like it's someone's birthday or a death date. No, I was always a big fan. Like, I worked construction. I was a landscaper. So I always, especially I lived in New Jersey, so he was big in New York. So that's all I did was listen to Howard Stern constantly. So I was a huge fan of the show. I started doing comedy, and I put out these prank call CDs, and I mailed it into the show, and they started playing it on the air. And, you know, they're like, oh, we got to have this guy in. He's really funny. And then they go, oh, okay, you're booked. You're going to sit in for a whole day on this day in July. And, you know, if you know the show, you know when they, you know, jump in and jump out. I'm like, all right, great. I just couldn't believe it. I mean, I remember being in the green room like 10 to 6. The show starts at 6 a.m. And I'm just standing there. And I see Howard walk by. I see Robin. I see Fred. I see everybody. I'm like, oh, I can't believe I'm here. I'm like, this is unbelievable. I've been fans of these people forever. I go, all right, I can't mess it up. I go, I got one shot. I go, so just pretend like they're just your friends. I go, you know the show, so just bust balls. That's the show. You know, I remember like the first 3 minutes, Howard's like, hey, nice to meet you, whatever. Jim's going to sit in the show. And he's right in there telling a story about him and Beth, his wife, on the beach. And they found like a bird or something like that, and they saved the bird, and he had a tear in his eye. And I go, Howard, I go, you should really check your pants for penis. And he just, I knew it to throw it out, and he just lost it. And I was like, God, I got my first laugh. That was like 5 minutes into the show.
So this is obviously Jackie had just left, and this is that point where they were sort of auditioning for that chair. Were you auditioning, or were you just sitting in? Because we know Artie gets it at the end of the year, but I know what Craig Gass was in there, Ron Zimmerman, Fitzsimmons, I believe. They just kind of brought in a bunch of guys. I don't know if they were. Did you feel like you were auditioning, or was it just, hey, just sit in? And how did they explain it to you?
No, it wasn't an audition. They just said, look, we're going to have different guys, rotating guests to sit in. We're going to rotate you guys. We're going to pick like 8 or 10 guys. And I'm like, okay, so we didn't even know it was an audition. But I guess at some point they go, hey, we like Artie's the best for this job, so let's hire him. Which is fine. I mean, he was great for the job. I mean, he, you know, I wasn't jealous or anything like when he got the job. Like, okay, that's fine. I was still going on the show all the time, so it didn't really make a difference.
Do you ever think about what would have happened if maybe, let's say, Artie has some sort of weird meltdown during this audition, and then you get the job, and what that would have? Do you ever think about that? Like, what it would have been like to wake up every morning and be on that show, or is it, hey, this worked out? People know who I am now from that show, and everything worked out anyway without having to be on it.
Well, being on it takes you to a whole other level. I mean, you know, it's really got a very strong cult following. And I don't know, I think it would have overshadowed, like Artie is always going to be known as the guy from the Howard Stern show. And I think I've kind of crawled my way to the middle of this business. And I've been doing it for 30 years, just kind of existing in this really nice space where I make a good living. I get to do what I want creatively, and I'm not at anyone's behest. I'm not anyone's guy. And so I've managed to always have some kind of project going on that keeps me out there a little bit, to be able to draw at the comedy clubs. But I think it would have been tough to do that job. I mean, it's a fucking grind. You got to get up early in the morning and you got to be on. And, you know, I'm sure there's office politics that I was never a part of because I was just in and out as a guest. So I think I was relieved when I didn't get it, but it certainly would have been a huge boost to my career.
The way you mentioned that, now that I think about it, it's amazing Artie pulled off 9 years, right? I mean,
was it 9 years? Wow.
Yeah, well, 2002 to 2009. My math might be maybe 8.5. But either way, the fact that he really did show up at least the first 6 years pretty much all the time and then kind of spiraled.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, he's a workman, you know. I mean, he comes from blue-collar stock, so he's like a guy that shows up for work. You know, he may be on heroin, but he shows up. And again, like, I that show really needed him at that time because everybody was getting older, and everybody used to go to strip clubs. Like, everybody on the Stern Show used to live a wild life, and they all got a little bit suburban. And then I think Artie came in, and he was this breath of fresh air.
What do you? I mean, have any contact with Artie at all? I ask everyone who joins me here.
Sure. Yeah. I talked to Artie.
How is he?
He's hanging in there. You know, he's sober. He's staying busy. He's starting to go out and do stand up again.
He is. Well, now can you tell us a little bit about when where would we see him? He's not promoting this.
I have no idea. I don't know.
Is he? But he's healthy because there's this like, oh, where did he go? He's this one little tweet and then he's gone. He was doing a podcast and we lost him. So you're saying he's healthy. You're keeping in touch.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a reporter. I have no idea. You know, I think he's doing fine.
Is it like? I mean, when they call you and tell you you're not going to do this anymore, how was it devastating, or were you like, "Oh, great time"?
I was kind of exhausted because I didn't know until the end of Tuesday every week that I was coming back next Monday and Tuesday. So, and I was doing drugs back then too. So it's like, you know, it started to become a mind fuck of like, I don't know where this is going. It was supposed to be a 2-day audition and it's going on all year long. And I didn't know where the light at the end of the tunnel was. So once I got word, hey, this is over, where we decided to go with Artie, it was like, all right, cool. And it's funny because I would see Artie sometimes at auditions, and I genuinely got the feeling that Artie carried some kind of guilt because of the way he would talk to me. He would always go, hey, I don't know if you heard, do you hear the show today? And I'd say, no. And apparently a caller called in and said, hey, Artie, I love you. And he'd go, oh, thanks, buddy. And they'd go, yeah, but Craig Gass is better. And did you hear that? And I was like, no, I didn't. That's funny. And it really was
funny to me that he would point that out to me, like, "Hey, man, fans love you," and he was always incredibly sweet to me, you know. So,
but not depressing at all to think that that could have been you for the next 10 years. I mean, does that, or is it? That's the way show business is, right? I mean,
no, I mean, there's nothing depressing. I mean, I've been paying my bills and my mom's bills for 20 years. Like, there's no downside to, like, if you say there's a downside, it's like, well, you could have had this much more money, but I never finished high school. And I went to high school for a long time, you know, and I still don't have my diploma. And so everything turned out so much better than I expected. And I continue to get work, and I'm starting to do stuff with Howard again.
So you mentioned Artie, and Artie takes that spot, and he runs with it for a good 9 years, and it was hilarious radio. I always say there's this double era. Jackie era was awesome. That's how I kind of learned about the show. The Artie era made me a super fan. I mean, I just thought Artie was so great. Did you listen back then? Did you find Artie funny? And have you talked to Artie in a while? How is Artie? Everyone wants to know.
All the time. Oh, and dude, that is like, I went down this rabbit hole of like watching videos of like, here's the pitch, and I'm like, I haven't heard a single pitch. And then there's all these Artie update videos, and none of them have an update. It's like, here's Scott the engineer, here's so-and-so, and here's so-and-so with an Artie update. It's like, what's the update? I don't know.
It's kind of my running gag, yes.
But I listen all the time. I have a Sirius radio. They gave me a free subscription, so I listen all the time. And all the Artie years were amazing. I mean, it's like I was more familiar with that than I was the Jackie era, because even when I was in Seattle calling in from 95 to 98, I wasn't listening. I still wasn't listening to the show. I still had never heard the Howard Stern show. And but yeah, when I get out to New York, and then I started listening, and then I became part of the show, and then I go through that whole experience of being in there, and it was crazy.
You don't keep in touch with Artie. No one does, right? I mean, that's the whole point of the Artie update, is that no one has one, except Nick DiPaolo had him. Was that you calling in to Nick DiPaolo's show, or who the hell was that? He had Artie in November, and it was like, is that Artie? I don't think that is.
Artie's doing great. He's actually teaching kickboxing now. No.
I'm a yoga instructor. I do 9 to 5. I do a lot of, downward dog.
I feel like we have to satisfy the clickbait and tell everybody that he's doing great. But yeah, man, we actually did shows right before COVID hit. We did a few shows together, and he's lost a bunch of weight, and he's healthier and happier, and he's doing good. I haven't talked to him in probably. I feel like I want to have an update for you to be able to say, oh, dude, he's yeah, man, he's doing a spin class. He's fucking awesome. But yeah, he's doing good.
Let's just go with he's going.
I haven't had him on the phone for a few months, but he's doing good.
Okay, that's good. So we just want to hear he's doing good. He went just dark. Like, Artie doesn't go dark. He was going to do this podcast, and he was going to read stories, and then gone. I hope he's okay. What about the time you guys did Carnegie Hall, and you opened for him, right? Was that one of your bigger times to be on stage and just, I mean, probably like a rock and roll show, right? Because Artie comes, and it's not just comedy. It's every, hey, man, let's go. I mean, was that one of the bigger shows for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think the audience, look, as Stern's gotten older, the audience has gotten older. So it's not really that circus environment anymore at those live shows. They're like, they're middle-aged guys from Long Island that drove in, and I think they respected that it was Carnegie Hall. I think everybody sort of felt like, wow, this is a big deal, And but I remember Howard walked in. I can't remember whose set it was during it. Might have been mine, but he walked in while the show was going on, and obviously everyone just stopped and turned, and him and Beth walked down the aisle, and everybody cheered, and he sat down, and then it couldn't have been Art. Maybe it was me. I can't remember. But it was a pretty special night. Having been somebody that grew up in New York and, you know, went to Carnegie Hall a million times in my life, and you know, all the famous albums that have come out of there, from, you know, Lenny Bruce to George Carlin and Bob Newhart, you know, to be on that stage was pretty, even though I wasn't the headliner, it still felt pretty special.
That was Artie. We talked, but we always talk Artie. No contact.
I know as much about Artie as you do, bro. You know, I haven't seen him in years. He gave me a number. It was changed, and that's that. You know, I would love to see him, but I don't have no idea where he is or how to get in contact with him. He's on Twitter, very rarely. I DM'd him once, twice, maybe. He didn't respond. I'm going to leave it at that. I'm not going to bother him. You know, maybe he has an issue like I can't be with any of those people anymore. Who knows? You know, when people go through stuff like that, they just got to drop everything that they did and go in a different direction. So maybe that's what he's doing.
Yep.
So I hope he's well, and I'm sure he is, since I haven't heard any other news about him. So we'll see.
Yeah, hopefully it comes out. Another guy, of course, I'd love to talk to. Met him a few times. But as we talk about these great moments, Artie in Vegas, I don't know how hammered you got there, but we know Artie was completely out of...
But no, he was... he got lit up, man. He got lit up. He had a blackout, and he was running around like a lunatic.
Was it fun to follow that, or was it more, God, this is...
You know what? It was fun, but it was crazy, man. Like I said, I might have said this the last time on the show. After the show, he was in a blackout after that drinking show, and I went to his hotel room, and he had thrown everybody out, and his mother and his sister and his girlfriend were there, and they were like, "Can you please take care of him?" So make sure. And I grabbed him, and he jumped in a limo, and we went to this strip club that he was making an appearance at, and it got really crazy, and it was a little scary because he was running around, and he tried to punch the manager of the club, and I kind of caught his arm, you know, on the throw, and I was like, I didn't know what to do, and I called, you know, Ronnie, and I'm like, Ronnie, you got to get somebody here to help me, man, because this guy's out of his mind. I think they're going to put us in a fucking hole in the desert, you know, like it was like that serious, you know. And sure enough, like a half hour later, Ronnie showed up with Howard and Beth and Joe, the other security guy. And Joe said something to Artie, and Artie just sat there and was like sedate, you know. He was like, fine. Like, I don't know what Joe said to him, but Joe was able to calm him down within seconds. And then once they were there, I'm like, all right, he's taken care of. I'm out of here. So I went and did my thing. And then the next day I ran into him, and he was just like, you know, listen, I heard what you did for me last night. I appreciate it, you know. And he was just very thankful, you know. And I'm like, dude, Artie, you know, whatever you need, man, I got your back, you know that. And yeah, that was just it was fun, but it was out of hand. It was craziness, you know. Like, again, they were drinking the whole show, and I was working the whole show, so I was you know, straight, you know. I was, you know, sober, so I'm sure if I was drinking with them, it'd probably be a different story. But no, we just you know, I took care of what I had to take care of, and then, you know, moved on. So that was that.
When I got out of prison, I auditioned on Sirius to replace somebody, and I didn't get the job. And I was a little mad because when I was in prison, Stern kind of promised me, hey, when you get out, you know, we'll take care of you if you ain't got a job. And I was like, okay. Well, when I got out, that didn't happen. So that was another reason I was a little bitter with the sex tape. I should have released it. Maybe I will someday.
The sex tape. I can't believe, though, you destroyed the smoking gun, though. The nude, disgusting...
Well, you know, honestly, I thought it would bring nothing but bad upon me. I did. So karma, you know, karma's a bitch, and karma works throughout the universe, even after you're gone. So, like my mother said, you know, do what's right, not what you think is right.
Yeah. Are you following what Stuttering John's up to these days? I think he seems to like to...
Oh, my God, I've heard so much. What's going on? Tell me some of it.
I don't follow. I just see wars. Him and Shuli have this long-running war, and now KC's got... It's the battle of all you...
KC's inserted into it. Isn't Anthony Cumia in it, too?
I would assume. I would think everybody, really. I'm trying to stay out of it myself. I like to watch from this.
Everybody should pile on Stuttering John.
Do you think you could still kick his ass in the state you're in now?
Oh, yeah, totally. You know, it's funny. I was asking, my girlfriend said, she goes, Lexi's her name. She goes, you know, have you ever been in another boxing match or thought about it? And I was like, you know, I thought about wheelchair boxing, but I don't think it would work because you can't swing and hit the other guy. It'd be like this. It'd be kind of comical. But then she sent me this video of this guy flipping another guy over, two guys in wheelchairs getting a confrontation on Reddit. And the one guy flips the other guy over and tries to stab him.
Maybe kangaroo fighting, maybe.
Yeah, with my dead legs.
What's this girl, Lexi? How long have you been with this?
We've been together, God, it's got to be coming up on 3 years now, I think. She's amazing. She's got a beautiful daughter, and I'm in love. So it's part of the reason, most of the reason I moved to Raleigh.